mind. So we're going to go ahead and call to order. So Mayor Pro Tem Julio Martinez. Absent.
He's not going to make it tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Mike Laura.
Here.
City Manager Todd Parton.
Here.
Economic Development Manager Kyle Warshinsky.
I'm here.
Member Bernie Balland.
Here.
Member Bertha Barraza.
Here.
Member Terrence Davis, present. Chamber Member Jennifer Higgins is absent.
The chamber's here, though.
Okay.
But he just has to come sit by me.
Okay.
They're two different things. But she's a real estate agent in the area. She could be a chamber member if
So Betty Rader,
sign her up.
Betty Rader is here.
We'll hunt her down.
Member Rob Moran.
Present.
Member Kimberly Stars is absent. And business member Kathleen Dietrich is absent. So we do have a quorum. Okay, we're going to move to Pledge of Allegiance. So if I could have everybody stand. And Ms. Barraza, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, looking over the agenda, are there any adjustments or anything that we need to note on the agenda for change, Mr. Warshinsky?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Is there anything on the agenda this evening that poses a conflict of interest for anyone? So you're not doing anything, Mr. Parton, all this?
Nothing I'll admit to.
Okay, all right. Good. Okay, sounds good. So moving on to item number 1, public comments. Is there anyone here for public comments? I do see there's someone in the audience. I don't know if they have
Good, yeah.
public comments or not. Or... No? Okay. Comments? So let's go ahead and move to action item 2 and approve the minutes from November 14th, 2018. Any comments, questions, any revisions?
I'll make a motion to approve November minutes from November 14th, 2018.
So Mr. Laura first. Is there a second?
I wasn't here, so.
So I'll make a second.
Second.
Oh, so Mr. Rob Morris, second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Barraza and Mr. Bernie Balland will abstain. Okay, so before we get to updates from projects from the city, I do want to just make a note. Mr. Warshinsky sent out applications. We talked about it last time about members for the future because people are terming out. We had a conversation in Beaumont Unified School District about was anyone interested, and there was like all these people just like, yes, I want to do it, I want to do it. And so there was almost like a fight that ensued. And so as a result of that, we have Mr. Mike Satley, who's here this evening, kind of observing, and he beat me out. I kind of had to give because he's so excited about being involved, and he's an expert in facilities. So he will be, and we'll talk about application and how we do that process. So I want to welcome you here this evening, Mr. Satley.
Can you remind us on the timelines for that again?
Need it like now. So I think council's looking at doing the appointments on the first meeting in January, which is January the 2nd. It's a Wednesday, so it's a unique council day for us, but because the first falls on a Tuesday, the council's rules allow them to have the meeting on the 2nd. So for any of the members that are terming out, if you're interested in reapplying or if your organization has someone else interested in applying, we'll need those within the next week or two in order to put them in the queue for that council meeting.
They're every year, annual, or?
The terms are not 1 year. I think they're 2-year terms. I think.
Yes.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so they're
You're
2-year
correct.
terms, so you would be on board for another 2 years or so.
I just didn't think I'd been on for 2 years.
You filled an empty spot.
Okay.
So your position was taking over from someone else that had
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So sorry for that ad lib. I'm probably violating something, which is typical. But, and I think Mr. Sally also said he really likes being a chair because he's just so good at stuff. So just, just little comments. Okay, so moving on to 2B, update from projects from the city.
So now we can talk about applications, since we're in the update section. So yeah, I think you all have the application if you want to fill it out. One item is during the council meetings for appointments, typically city council may want to ask the applicant some questions. So a lot of times those appointments are done at the beginning of the council meeting, so that they don't have to sit through the entire action items to get to the appointments at the end. So it may require attendance on January the 2nd. It's not 100% required though, so if you can't make it and you still apply, then you could still be appointed.
Okay. Sounds like you're in. Any other updates? No other updates from the city?
Other updates is we're well underway on the sewer treatment plant expansion and upgrade. The brine line construction management getting into gear with their pre-construction meetings. So we'll start building that pipeline out to San Bernardino. Potrero interchange is, I wouldn't say nearing completion, but well underway. It definitely looks like a bridge now, and I think we're still on target to meet the expected completion date of late, maybe early spring of 2019. I think that's kind of what we're shooting for. We're currently under final design on the ramps for the interchange, and then the city manager's office has started conversations with some of the local landowners within the area, as well as RCTC, and we're also talking to federal EDA about potential grant funding that may end up coming in, or we can apply for, to help pay for some of those ramps on the Potrero interchange. So we're exploring different funding options, and as more of that comes forward, we'll bring it to City Council and see exactly what's going to work. As the chairman alluded to, we've had a decent amount of ribbon cuttings in the last couple weeks or so. Those are all projects that we've talked about here at the Economic Development Committee for basically the 2.5 years that the committee's been in existence. Gives you a good idea of kind of some good stories that come out of economic development and planning and what the city does. You don't see them too often, but we're excited to have those businesses open out there. So if you haven't gone to them, most of them are open. We're still waiting on the car wash, the Les Schwab tire to complete, and then the Ono Hawaiian Barbecue is still doing their improvements on the inside of the building with the dental office. But the Sonic and the Panera Bread and the Pyology are all open, and reports from their managers are business is pretty good out there for them, so they're fairly happy about it. What else are major projects? I mean, I'll talk about the strategic plan when we get to that item. That's one of the major ones that I've been working on. Todd, am I missing any glaring?
I think those are the major ones. The only thing I might add is that Riverside County and WRCOG and RCTC are taking the lead in trying to put together a regional transportation improvement plan. And they're looking at programming improvements to the Highland Springs interchange, Pennsylvania Avenue, Cherry Valley Boulevard, as well. So, and then Potrero Phase 2. So those are some key projects that are included within that short-range transportation improvement plan.
So I do have one question regarding the Oak Valley overpass and the revisions there. I know, I believe that there's going to be putting in some signals, and it's not going to be, maybe I said like, is it going to be 4 lanes, or is it like a turning lane that will be there?
It's 3 lanes. If you notice out there on that construction, there's some new curbs that have been poured as you approach the bridge, and so that's to allow a 3rd lane for left-hand turn movements. So that'll kind of help add a little bit more capacity as you come up. So you have traffic signals, traffic lights on each side, and then you've got a little bit of widening there to move traffic.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So anything else from the city, or any other questions?
Carl, do we have an ETA on the car wash?
They look like they're almost done.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
They'll probably have to do some interior for the office or whatever's on the inside, but the office is fairly bare bones, because I don't think many customers go inside if they can at all.
Okay.
So I'm thinking by the end of this month, and if not, most likely January for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so before we move forward, just want to note and welcome member Kimberly Stars at 411 for the record. Okay.
I apologize for being late.
Oh, you're fine. It's all good. So moving on to item 2D, and that is really just the economic strategic plan, the short-term and long-term plan, and the community vision statement. Is there any questions, concerns, comments about any of those things, including the community goals?
Nothing on the goals. I do have some discussion points on D.
Okay, so let's talk about the strategic plan and the update.
So I have handouts in the back. I don't know if everyone grabbed one. Ms. Stars, did you pick one up?
I did not.
Okay.
She has one.
Grab
She has one.
another
I'm sharing.
We share.
Well, then you don't have one.
Oh, we share.
I have enough copies, otherwise I'm gonna throw one.
Thank you.
So what that is it's the summary of the first Economic Development Strategic Plan Summit meeting that was held in November. We're having another one tomorrow, but what this one does is it summarizes and recaps all the different items that were discussed at the last summit meeting. So at that meeting, the consultant that the city has hired, that city council's hired to perform the strategic plan, kind of gave a brief overview of what was going to be occurring at the summit meetings, as well as how they will take that information gained by all the stakeholders in the room and then package that into a final report that goes to city council that sets the policies and potential programs for the city as well as staff to implement over a 3 to 5 year period of time. So what group efforts occurred at this first summit meeting is they wanted to start off with one of those typical SWOT analyses that you do when you bring in a bunch of stakeholders to the room. As you can see by the summaries, we broke out into 3 different small groups, and small being like 15 to 20 people each. So it was fairly well attended by the stakeholders within the community. We went over the opportunities and the threats that each of the stakeholders really saw or felt was valuable or important enough to bring up. And then the consultant basically compiles all that data. You can see from the work that the Economic Development Committee did, a lot of the same strengths are on there that we did for our SWOT analysis, and many of the threats that we identified in our SWOT analysis were identified at that stakeholder meeting, which means we were pretty much in line with the rest of the community when we were doing ours. But they wanted a nice refresher on it. You can see that some of the small groups had differing opinions. So some of them wanted more affordable housing, and then some were bring in some very nice high-end housing. So you can see how different groups prioritized the same topic differently. I'm sure you all have already taken a chance to look at them, but is an interesting exercise to go through. Sorry, I kept them all. Yeah. Did anyone else need one?
Yes,
I stole them.
I think there's a doctor here. Oh, there he is. Doctor.
Hey, sorry about that.
So we can talk about those tonight. Really, I wanted this item to be pretty much the meat of tonight's meeting, is to kind of go over some of the things that happened at that meeting. If we could get feedback from the group on that summit meeting, what you thought went well, what you thought didn't go quite so well. If you didn't like the bagels, if it weren't the right flavor, any of that stuff, we can discuss that at tonight's meeting. At the same time, I didn't bring tomorrow's agenda with the meeting material. I had sent that out last Thursday via email, so everyone in this room would have got that from me. And what that has is tomorrow's agenda, as well as a lot of the work that staff and the consultant have been doing to identify target clusters, industry clusters. So we take some of this stuff on the strengths and threats. We look at the raw data that the consultant has been compiling throughout the city. They call it the I-10-60 corridor, as well as the Inland Empire region. And we start tomorrow figuring out where the city of Beaumont fits within the industries that are within the area. Which ones do we want to target? Which ones do we think we want to keep an eye on? And which ones do we just not care about whatsoever? And we let those industries kind of do what they want, but we're not emphasizing or throwing a bunch of resources at trying to attract or keep those. So that'll be tomorrow's exercise. If you're bored tonight, you haven't read it, go ahead and read some of that data. I find it interesting, but that's because it deals with things I deal with all the time. So with that, I kind of went over the summary of Summit Meeting 1, did a brief intro on tomorrow's Summit Meeting number 2, so if anyone has any questions or wants to provide any comments, I'll open it up to the group and we can discuss this item freely. Thank you.
I thought it was a really well-run meeting. I don't even know what I was expecting. I kind of went into it with like, all right, well, what's going to happen? And I really liked the breakout. I thought the facilitators were great. The one thing that I wasn't really sure about was the role of city staff in the small breakout sessions. I think maybe I was in a group that had a lot of city staff in it, so kind of opinions and voices from people not on city staff were not that they weren't heard as much, but it seemed like there was rebuttal almost for everything that was being said by city staff from people in the community, and that it's defending the work that they're doing, and any kind of criticism kind of was met with and also. So I think that would be my only, I don't even want to say it's a criticism, but just observation.
Sure.
Maybe spreading out city staff among.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. The intention of city staff in the room was for them to observe versus participate, because we somewhat already know kind of what we're involved in. And by staff participating in the process, we could potentially be diluting the insight from the rest of the stakeholders that don't work in City Hall every single day.
And that was kind of my perception, because we do similar things with our nonprofit group, and we try to keep our staff members who are, paid professionals in that arena, kind of, you're there to observe and listen and let our volunteers speak. So I had wondered if it maybe was the same type of thing. But just an observation, it was fantastic. It felt like everybody's voices were able to be heard, but I thought maybe that was something you'd want to hear about.
Sure.
Can't let people choose their own group, so they're going to stay in the group by whoever they're sitting by. You got to break them up in numbers.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you did?
That's probably what it was, though. A lot of people that were sitting, I mean, the group just kind of stuck together, but
Yeah.
I think there was still good feedback. I think they were filling in when there was sessions of quietness or no response, but like you said, they did chime in too, so that probably was the feeling some of the people might have gotten, but Terrence jumped up and walked away from our group right away, so
I think I was
they
kicked
didn't have
out.
to split us up.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Are we going to have a town hall for the community to provide input? Because I felt that a lot of the participants, and it was very well attended, and I like that.
Sure.
It was mainly from people that represented some type of business organization, and I would like to hear the voice of the community.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if you are planning on a town hall or something to that fashion.
So that concept is something that we mulled over with the consultant before starting the summit meetings, and what their advice to us is that you bring in the business representatives or the representatives from the different agencies within the room to work on your strategic plan, because they're the ones that are closely tied to the industry groups. The residents have roots here because they own a house here. They may not work here, most likely based on the statistics that we saw. They don't work here, and why they have opinions on what needs to be done here, they're not the movers and the shakers of those industry groups that are going to get those types of things done. So it's possible we'll bring in the community for a workshop near the final stage of the strategic plan just to provide some feedback. But to actually make the plan, we need the movers and the shakers versus the residents. And then what will happen is city council gets to act as the what word am I looking for? The basically liaison for the residents on approving the plan. They're the ones that were elected to represent the residents within the area. So they get to set the policy on what the city wants to see. And then the plan will be an evolving document. The final plan now will be set early 2019. But as we see things shift and we see economies change, obviously that document's going to need to change with it, or else it'll become stale very, very quickly. So I think that council is going to be able to provide a really good insight from the community themselves. And that's kind of what we've done from staff's level, is really put together some data review, some industry review, get the stakeholders in the room to let us know what they need and what they don't need, or what challenges they're seeing. And then that way we'll package it up, and then that's kind of where it's at. But we are soliciting tremendous community input on like this communications plan and the branding effort and those types of things that Ashley's working on, versus this, which is more industry or business based.
So how are you gathering the data?
On the strategic plan stuff, so the consultants going on the different data websites that are available, so Census, Community Fact Finder, which is part of the census. They're pulling it from retail data sources. They probably subscribe to one of the major employment data websites that not all of us have free access to. That gives you how many people work in what industry group, where do they live, where do they drive. So that's done a little bit more robustly than census data. But yeah, the consultants bringing in those multiple different types of data sets and giving us the data for us to review, and as well as for the stakeholders to review tomorrow. But if you have any comments on those or any suggestions, we can always take that up with them.
I'm too radical for that. I'm better not.
So I have a huge criticism. So the coffee. And there it took 10 minutes to open, but once we got it open, it was good. So
We
there
couldn't
was,
figure out the opening?
it took a minute, yes.
All
And there
right.
was several of us trying, but we worked through
We
it.
will get that squared away
Worth
prior to 7:30 tomorrow, is getting the coffee accessible.
So being well attended really goes back to the messaging and how you sent that out. I was really impressed with that. I think that shows, hey, we have these people involved, we're here, people didn't leave. It was good. That was great. When I'm looking at this document, though, and I don't know if this can be worked on before tomorrow morning, it's a little late, but is there going to be a compilation of this document? Because, you know, you have the 3 separate groups and they all have those different sections, but if it can be compiled or, you know, crossed out or whatever, then it's a little bit more of a succinct conversation versus kind of going back over every one of those. And I think that would help kind of expedite the meeting, if you will.
I think they're working on that for the end game in terms of the plan. This was more of a summary of what
Okay.
happened, but I'm guessing they're going to compile it. If not, they're going to now, and based on your comments. So we'll get that compiled. Tomorrow's doesn't necessarily deal with some of this stuff.
Okay.
It'll deal with the data. Well, you'll see it in the morning.
Okay.
I don't want to ruin the surprise.
Make sure you come.
Well,
Real quick, did anybody catch the documentary this morning on CNN, not CNN, NPR, on Beaumont, on how we are,
Oh yeah,
growth,
that.
yeah.
anybody download it?
Yeah, it was a radio cast.
An hour, and then
Oh, an
tomorrow is
hour.
the second half.
Oh, no.
I had a
I know
meeting.
because we were working with the
Meeting this
reporter
morning.
on it.
Beg your pardon?
I said we as staff were working with the reporter on that. I didn't get a chance to listen to it this morning though.
I wanted to listen
Was it
for an
good?
hour.
Wow.
9:45 to 10:45. I didn't get to listen because I was in
Oh,
a
okay.
meeting. And then tomorrow is the second half.
So I believe it's the same thing, but we were a part of that. We were called and asked by the radio station to provide what are we doing in Beaumont because of the growth. And so I provided some information on that podcast. So did the Riverside County superintendent about just the issue of funding for schools. And then there was another community member about moving here and like, now my kids can't go to this school and what do we do? So it's just kind of like this is an issue in kind of articulating the message about what is happening. So I think that will be good. And if any way pushing that out really kind of brings people at ease or gives them some understanding that there are things in motion, there are things in place, and people just don't know. So
I'll look for it and I'll send the link for everyone to read it or listen to it.
We'll be in the summit meeting tomorrow, but let's try to find the links to both podcasts, and then we could probably send it out to the group if available.
I have it, Kyle. I can send it to you. And it may be the same thing. I'm hoping it's
I'm
the
sure
same.
it is.
It's funny because they originally called me and wanted to know what we were doing about schools.
Okay.
So then I had to blame you.
Oh, I see.
He said, I know the
Like,
guy.
I'd love to be able to help you out on
Okay,
what
I
the
know.
school is doing for this, but you probably need to call
I see.
Terrence or Mike, and then they'll explain what they're doing with facilities.
QVCR, public radio.
That's it.
I tried to give it to Mike, but he pushed it back to me, so I don't.
We got hit with traffic congestion, so I couldn't push that off on you guys.
So they're really trying to say there's a lot of traffic here?
They were just wanting to know what the city, and in this case the school district, are doing proactively to keep pace with a tremendous amount of growth. Which, in our scenario, I mean, I can only speak for what we're doing, and I can speak for what I've witnessed the school district do for the last 12 and a half years that I've worked here, is that we're fairly proactive compared to other regions. I've seen other cities grow fast, but their infrastructure lags tremendously. Here we don't see that. I mean, obviously we have some complaints on certain streets, but if we're speaking in relative terms,
No, this is fantastic.
our traffic isn't
So-
bad relatively to other things.
Yeah, it's nice and calm, and I don't go into a rage driving across town here.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
Sure.
Everywhere
So-
else, yes.
Because, we'll get complaints here at City Hall, and it's that it took 10 minutes or so to get through a
Send them to
certain
my office.
portion of town, and then I go, well,
They can stop crying.
when's the last time you went to like the Tyler Mall in River? Oh, I never go there. It's like, yeah, that's traffic. And then you take the polarizing traffic
Been on the
that's
91.
Riverside, and then you go to Orange County or to LA, and then that's,
Get it.
you just keep expanding exponentially, right? In terms, so that when you bring it back down to the local level, your 5-minute wait is traffic.
Right.
Relatively, it's not too bad. So I think we've done a good part with the city and the region, and I think the school has done a phenomenal job as well. We keep getting new schools. It's not like they haven't built a new school in a while. I've seen a couple get built so far, and they just finished the high school when I first started here, and they built the entire athletic complex, the administration offices, and the stadium. So they've done a lot to keep pace with the growing demand of the city population. So I think that's kind of what you'll find in the NPR. Obviously, I can't speak for what they're going to do because news outlets can slant stories based on what they're looking for.
It
So I'm
sounded-
anxious to listen to it to
It
see.
sounded very positive, though.
Well, that's good.
I was really excited to listen to it. I go, I won't be able to. It's very interesting you mentioned traffic because on topic 2 of the report from the last, what was it, event that we had?
Sure.
The number 1 item that they listed is traffic congestion, especially at freeway off-ramps.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think it's only 1 off-ramp that really, you can see that. It's highlighted.
For now, yeah. Yep.
Oak Valley is bad. Oak Valley is
I
bad.
don't even take Beaumont Avenue. I get off on 6th Street and just go that way. Way easier.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that the interchanges with the freeways are some of the choke points within the city.
You know, I think this is more of an economic development perspective, but maybe the flip side to that whole argument is that that's one of the reasons that you're getting all these different retailers that are coming to town is because you have these folks that are traveling to and from the city spending their money, and you can't have, unfortunately, you can't have one without the other. It doesn't necessarily mean it makes it easier when someone's sitting at an intersection or off-ramp or whatever, but that's why you're getting the Panera Breads of the world and why you're getting, and so there's a flip side to that coin that's commerce. That traffic is commerce in a sense.
Yeah, and if a prospective tenant doesn't see traffic, then in their mind, there's no people. No people means no bagels being sold in this scenario. So,
Well, I've tried to recruit retailers to a community on the basis of potential. Especially when they talk about locating 3 years out in construction in 5-year typical windows. And they're not interested as a broker in going to a board and saying, let's go get this potential site. There's going to be 10,000 trips in that location in 3 years. They need to see that there's impact and there's people in a market there today.
Current traffic counts are.
Exactly. They don't operate off of potential. They operate off of a known quantity.
It's almost in a rear, so it's like
Exactly.
we have to have all of these things in order to have infrastructure or places to go. And so just going back to part 2, and so I think part 2 is about infrastructure. So I sent you the link, Todd. And so I don't know, Kyle, Todd, I don't know, where's Todd? I don't know. So given that, I don't know if they had conversation with you because it really goes back to the original person that came up in the city about, I moved here, there's all of this stuff. There's no, the congestion, the this, and with schools, what we found is even going out to each of the school site and speaking to the teachers, they don't know. They don't know what we have in plan, and so it becomes this panic. Mm-hmm. Same thing with parents, and it's like, what are we doing? And so, over the past couple years, picking back up on the plan, and so we've had 2 board sessions where we've talked about the future and plan, and we're going to be having a study session on January 12th, which is a Saturday, to get a little bit more in depth about what do we do with this growth at the secondary level. But when I go out, and I'm not an expert, Michael Sally is an expert, but when I go out and regurgitate the information that he's planted in my head, people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I see. They just want to know that you have a plan. So for us, it's really about how do we communicate that and then let them know we're talking about it and we're going to be okay. So a conversation we had today in the office was just about even Olivewood and in Pardee about we thought we were going to be selling 20 homes, but now it's 10. It's like because we are now, it's slowing down just a little bit. And so, again, when you tell people that you may see these structures, but there's no one in it right now, it kind of goes, okay, so it's just getting that word out. So it was perfect timing for us.
And how this program got going is that the editorial board decided to go out to the community and get all of Riverside to their listening area and have citizens pose questions. So then their editorial board basically narrows it down to the top 3 questions that they like. Then they put it out there for a little informal survey of the listeners who then pick their most favorite question. And so this one popped up. I think this is the first in the series first topic in the series that they're doing. So, kind of hits on issues I think that everybody in their listening area is concerned about.
Okay, so going back to, we're still on Economic Development Strategic Plan. Any other comments? I know there'll be another joyous occasion in the morning, moving forward with that, developing that plan. Anything else?
The only other thing I have is the original letter I sent out inviting everyone to the meetings had 3 dates that were set. We, as staff, are thinking of changing the January date.
Do you have a new date?
We will have a new date tomorrow morning.
Okay.
We're thinking of later on in the month, or we're looking for potentially pushing it into February.
Okay.
So right now I think it's the 24th of January. What that does is it puts a lot of work in a short window of time, because the third summit, to my knowledge, is going to be somewhat reviewing a draft document. And if we're finishing this stuff now and then we have Christmas, it doesn't give our consultant much time to review that draft document with us as staff, as well as maybe even this committee, before we get to that summit meeting. So I think we're going to postpone the January meeting into February to give us a little bit more breathing room in terms of time to review something. It's probably not something that's important, not important, but it's not something that we want to rush through. We want to take our time to diligently review the material.
And Kyle, is that the third and final meeting, or at the third meeting there'll be a determination if there needs to be more?
It's the third one that's scheduled. I think that we're always open to having a fourth one if necessary. That may happen, it may not. It really depends on what occurs at that third meeting. But yeah, we're definitely not solid on having 3 and that's it, no matter what. How many do you want?
Oh, no. You know, meetings are, yeah. Try to
Are
minimize them.
wonderful.
They are.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we just try to, yeah. So under D2I, that discussion of committee member tasks, I don't know what that's about there. And is that a part of future topics, or these are things that we were going to work on upcoming? Because I know we had a discussion about having.
I sworn I removed some of those and put it. So we did add some down here on topics for
Right.
future, but it doesn't look like it got removed from D2.
Okay.
D2 is, cross that out.
Yeah, I mean, those are things we talked about, but right now the committee's kind of focused on the different summits and the strategic plans, so we may get back to these, but I've moved, I think, all of them down. Yeah, apprenticeship program.
You did have your funding meeting.
We did have the funding meeting, so we can talk about that. Yep.
What happened to all the business visits? I know I was gone the last 2 meetings, so my apologies. That was a bad look. My apologies, but
Your tickets now.
did we take that one off too?
That one we wrapped up, so everyone completed as many visits as they could, and then they compiled their reports and then sent them in to me. So I haven't done a kind of a brief on those. It definitely helps on the ones that needed assistance that we would contact. It also shows how difficult retention and expansion are.
Right.
Because some of the businesses don't necessarily want to meet with someone from the city or the committee. So you can see that but you can imagine that they're very focused on their business. And unless we have some type of program which we can link them with, we're probably bugging them, right?
Right.
So we have to have some value-added program in which we go in there and we can explain what things we can do to assist with their issues.
For the ones that requested follow-up, were we able to follow up, you know?
Yeah, we've made some contacts with them. Some of them are things that we're not able to actually come up with. Some of them are kind of like stay out of our business, so those are fairly easy, unless they have some code enforcement problem.
All right.
I
good
saw a
deal.
couple of those too.
Good deal.
It's like, well, you kind of got yourself into that situation on your own. So we're not out there like selecting businesses to enforce. We can only enforce what we see that doesn't meet the code. So
All right, good deal. Thank you.
So moving on to E, are there any of these that we want to talk about today or just push them given the strategic plan development? Cannabis in the area. I don't know if we talked about, did we talk about that
you
last?
guys told me put it on there, so I
Oh.
put it on there.
Wow.
It didn't come from me.
Todd, was that your suggestion, cannabis?
Well, the reason I brought the cannabis in the area up was, and I didn't get a location, but the County of Riverside is looking at approving cannabis within the unincorporated areas. And the concern that I had was that the decisions that they make can affect our city because of the location of unincorporated properties. And I wanted to see what those properties, where they would allow cannabis to be grown or sold, and what the proximity was to the city limits, because county touches pretty much everybody. So that was a concern that I had regarding cannabis.
So is that something that we can get some information on, or what is the criteria, or for information in the future? Maybe not the
Yeah,
next meeting.
if it's something that we want to discuss, I can reach out to Riverside County and ask for some of their guidelines.
Kyle, I know the planners that have worked on the new ordinance.
Mhm.
I'm happy to connect you with them, and
Sure.
maybe you'd like to invite them out for a future meeting, because
Okay.
it's kind of a two-pronged process. There are some uses that are allowed in certain zones, and then there's going to be an RFP process in the new year for retail and cultivation uses, and so, yeah, that might be good for you.
And maybe it's better to have them explain it
Yeah,
than it
it's
is for us
kinda
to read it and
complicated.
try to explain it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the important items with cannabis are the zoning that where cannabis will be allowed and where those zones are in proximity to the city of Beaumont. One of the things that the county is doing that I think is good is it's not a cap, but they're only allowing a certain number to start with, so they can kind of see what's going on. One of the other critical issues with cannabis or associated with cannabis when you grow is the amount of electricity that they draw. And the infrastructure or potential lack of infrastructure that exists to provide the power that they need. The draw on one grow is phenomenal, almost like one small city. So the infrastructure that they need to provide or to begin building or adding to existing substations is costly and very labor intensive or time consuming. So
Research there, Mr. Laura.
I will say, attended a roundtable regarding cannabis that the DA had today with city manager and law enforcement groups. They mentioned that the Inland Empire really is being considered the Napa Valley for cannabis growth. So, I mean, that's the level of market that they're talking about exists in this part of the world. And so that's not just talking about the geology and the weather, but that's also talking about infrastructure, highways, access to other markets. So that's the way this area is being viewed by the industry right now. So it has massive implications for us. And the problem that law enforcement is facing with this is what happens with the black markets, because it is extremely expensive to stand up an industry in California anyway, anywhere in the country. And so growers are facing a lot of costs associated with it, which is potentially driving growers into black markets, which obviously will be a massive issue with this industry for the foreseeable future. So how are we going to handle the review of that? The DA's office is setting up a task force that they want all the cities to participate in, which means providing police personnel into a county task force, which will be very expensive for every community, on top of what they have to do to address local issues. In addition to that, the zoning is one issue, but there's other legislation that keeps cropping up. One particular bill that's scheduled to be heard in January, February in the session when they come back is going to be the delivery of cannabis to any address in the state of California. So if you have a position like Beaumont does where we do not want to allow cultivation or retail or distribution, then anybody else can deliver into your community. And so that's going to have a massive impact through that process. So there's a series of regulations that our city's going to have to look at now on how to regulate the transport through this community. There'll be costs associated with that. So it's a very complex, far-reaching issue that goes beyond even the location of cultivation and retail and distribution.
Now, there are future plans for, maybe this is not an appropriate question, but are there future plans for that to go to residents in the community to have a voice in what residents think, or is this something that's solely and squarely landing on council's shoulders right now?
I mean, at this point, council's discussed that, council's policy that they've established.
Right. The policy as it stands today, but I mean, with all of the changes that are going to be happening inevitably with something like this, is that a plan moving forward, or are we going to rely on council to make those decisions?
At this point, there isn't a plan moving forward. The council is still looking at the issue. There is, Todd touched on, there are a number of issues that go beyond just the sale and cultivation. A lot of jurisdictions or cities are looking at this as a tax generator.
Right, absolutely.
But what they don't look at is the cost to police that tax generator, and is it profitable or for a city or not? And so I think there's still a lot to be seen. I know some of the jurisdictions are going wholeheartedly into the cannabis and increasing taxes. And in those areas, as Todd touched on, then the cost for cannabis becomes, I won't say prohibitive, but increases black market opportunities. And so there was an article in the paper a couple of weeks ago where even after it was approved and voted on in California, that black market has increased because of the process that legal people will have to go through. So really it hasn't addressed any of that like we thought it would, or that the people said it would when we voted on it. So there's still a lot to be seen, and then council's taking a good look at that. But at this point moving forward, there isn't a plan in place.
Yeah. Well, just a question, not, it's kind of an unknown.
It is.
Right now,
Very much so.
massively unknown thing, so.
Right.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that.
I thought that was a mild topic, but it's not. Wow. I mean, that's heavy duty.
It is.
Stuff.
Well, and this task force concept is each city that participates in the task force would receive really kind of unlimited legal assistance and enforcement assistance through the DA's office. Because, even with some smaller cases that have been prosecuted, the legal cost to the communities have been in hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had an illegal dispensary operation going on here, and we spent about $125,000 or so on that litigation ourselves here. That just concluded when I got on board. So, this is an extremely costly venture. The cities that have elected to get into it have looked at revenue streams that were based on a report that was created by the cannabis industry. And so it really shows a very healthy potential revenue stream coming into local government that, we'll see if that materializes or not.
Right.
Y'all know how those studies go. But if you just look at what's being asked of cities to participate in this task force, it is the donation of a full-time detective. So, if you look at direct and indirect costs just to participate, you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of close to $200,000. That's just to stand up and to have a task force created countywide that begins to try to oversee all the enforcement of county and state regulations that that are supposed to be applied towards these areas. Because it's not just zoning, it's not just black market issues, it's also getting into environmental issues. There's a lot of chemicals that are being used, pesticides being used in the growth of these, so there's also, the economic effects that have to be monitored, water quality issues. There's just a lot that we have to look into, and those are the conversations I think council's had. It's like, it's very early in this industry, and, is it better to try to let the industry kind of materialize, see what happens with it? And, Kyle, we were talking a little bit earlier today about news coming out that you've got some of the major, Pfizer and some of those other major companies which are now looking to begin to step into that market. So, so it's an interesting process, but as the DA said today, it's kind of the Wild West out here when it comes to cannabis right now. So, anyway.
And what's interesting is when you step back and think about it, when you look at the things that we're doing with, like Panera or Biology, those are businesses that are coming into a community that have an immediate positive impact. Tax revenues are not taking resources away from citizens. They're actually giving us the ability to provide more resources. So cannabis, at least based on what I've read and understand, is the only business that'll come into a community that takes more resources than it provides. And that's the concern that, at least that I have as a council member.
That would be really interesting to see the cities in the county who have, stepped in wholeheartedly in the valley, in the Coachella Valley, and Moreno Valley, Paris area, and see, how much revenue are they really bringing in, and what are all of the associated costs. It would be so interesting to see that.
The actual revenues have not been determined at this point in time. In fact, the ones they are receiving are much lower than the projections that the city manager explained. I've had dealings with some of the landowners and the businesses out in Cathedral City, and Cathedral City allowed the dispensaries that were medicinal only, right? So before the law was changed, all under the Assembly bill allowed it medicinally. And I know that those businesses were very disappointed in that city for allowing them in the way that they did, because then you had car dealers, for example, where you have people from Coachella Valley shopping for a car, smelling marijuana from the neighboring businesses, and they were not happy about it, which then turns into no car sale. So now the dealership owns property, which they have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cars that no one wants to go to, and the city didn't even bother to ask the businesses how they felt about allowing it. So they may have asked the residents, but it's to take your comments one step further, is if we were even to get into it, let's not just focus on how the residents feel, let's focus on the neighboring businesses on those storefronts. So if all the residents say, yeah, that's great, but who's going to want to own the store right next door, right? If you owned a tax business, would you want them right next door to you? Now, if you owned a Quickie Mart, that would probably be excellent, but maybe not a professional business suite and them opening up in your shopping center.
Well, the DA's office has identified 65 illegal dispensaries in Riverside County right now. Wow. 65. And if you look at what's going on, cartels are still involved in the cannabis business. So if you look at imports of cannabis from Mexico, it's about half today, or in 2015, of what it was in 2010. And that's because they've relocated their production to the United States because they're having to compete with higher grade cannabis now than what they used to produce and ship into the country. So, but when you look at some of those dispensaries, particularly the illegal ones, they are attached to cartels. And so, that, again, it's just kind of goes back to the Wild West. There's just so much going on, and you don't know on the surface, if you go into a shop and you're buying product, you don't know whose product you're buying right now. You just don't know. And so you can imagine everything that kind of goes along with that. So the cartel, the black market hasn't gone away. It's still here. They've relocated, and they've got a new business model that they're utilizing now than from what they used even 5 years ago. So it's evolving. That whole process is evolving so quickly, and it's not as clean. It's kind of like vaping. Vaping, a lot of kids vape because they think it's a healthier option to smoking. And vapors are marketing to kids. If you look at what's going on with cannabis, a lot of them are marketing to kids. That's the market that they're shooting for, a lot of it. And so, again, it's all those things that are kind of inherent to the entire process. So I know I'm sounding like a negative Nelly on cannabis, but I mean, those are just the facts. And those are some of the things that council's kind of been kicking around when they talk about, where should we be in this process of this industry at this stage?
So do we need to bring something back on the agenda about cannabis and
What I'll do is,
or?
based on the council member's request to bring back what is occurring in Riverside County, we'll go ahead and try to schedule something for a future meeting with Riverside County planning staff to discuss the actual ordinance, so the rules of the county on where it was allowed, how it's going to be allowed, and also take a look at the proximity between where they're going to be allowed in people's homes or people's businesses.
Okay.
So we'll try to set that up. If that rolls into a future discussion on some of the other items that we talked about tonight, we can go ahead and do that. But I think at this point, staff will we'll work on coordinating with Riverside County staff on bringing in an informational item.
If you'd like, we can kind of reach out to the DA's office. Maybe they can kind of do some discussion about kind of some things that they're looking on implementation. We can even reach out to the state Department of Cannabis. So there's a whole agency that's created on
Which they're going to have
website.
guidelines soon, right?
Yeah.
I'm so sad I lost that fight with you, Mike, because that's why I like coming, just learn so much.
It's just getting good.
I mean, man, wow. No, you won. You won. Okay, so I know last time, I don't know why we're going 9 all the way up, but CFDs, we talked about CFD presentation in terms of just information and how do we get the public to understand what they are, benefits, all of that. And I don't know, Kyle, what the outcome of that was. Do we have someone come and talk about CFDs? How does the city as well as the school district get that information out there? Because we're not done as a school district. There are other developers who are saying, hey, are you interested in that? So it's going to kind of be an open kind of door and articulating about what that really means and where the money goes.
Sure. I think it's something that we can definitely have come back to the EDC for an informational presentation. It's something that myself can speak to. I know Todd can definitely speak to it more than I. If we want to get into even a higher level of information, we can bring in our consultant that actually performs the CFDs and the rate and sets the rate and method and all that fun stuff. So it depends on how in-depth you want to be on the subject matter. If you want to know enough to be dangerous, if you want to know all the way to, if you want to set one up, how you go ahead and do it. And then I think for this committee, my suggestion would be to kind of your 30,000, 40,000 foot level on what CFDs are, how they're formed, who forms them, what entities can form them, what the benefits and what the cons are for them, and also talk about specifically the ones that the city has as well as the new one that the school district has on how they work and what they actually do for the residents. And that's been part of our issue with City Hall is we've had these CFDs forever. People in City Hall know a bunch about them, but that doesn't mean that the resident that purchased the house knows a bunch about them. So then they get concerned, or I think Bernie talked about it. You read something on Facebook and then immediately becomes true. If someone's talking about their CFD on Facebook, they may be putting out misinformation that it may be true or it may not be true. So I think that would be my suggestion, is to kind of allow us as staff to put together an informational thing. Todd has done multiple presentations to some of the HOA boards as well as the HOA members, so people that live within the HOA areas. He's done a couple of those. So we can probably take that presentation and kind of scale that to the EDC.
No, that I think that would be good, because the other piece to this is, again, the perception about what it is, and something that we're kind of facing with is, like, if we can create some type of FAQ where people go to as a reference, and exactly what you said, this is what it is, these are the rules, these are all of this, that way people have something tangible.
So what is your cell number?
725 Parton.
So the one thing, we got a whiz-bang presentation we can do. The one thing that we're working on is to try to get comparables to what those rates look like in other areas of the Inland Empire. So we're working to try to get that.
Okay, without going through all of the other topics there, there's quite a few. Is there anything else going up from 7 Up? I know, 7 Up? That we need to discuss, make sure we bring forward or anything? I mean, I'm going to have dreams about cannabis now.
Again?
I think you already did.
Wow.
Wow.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I have Tourette's today. Sorry about that. So I'll just say, on the recession side, what we're looking at, and the indications right now, is that we still have that recession looming, 1920. So we're starting to make plans budgetarily and operationally for what a 2020, 2021 recession is going to look like for us. We did get our 2018 property tax assessment report back from HDL, and so it shows about a 10% increase in assessed value for the city. About 2% of that is on the basis of CPI. So the formula for calculating tax rates year to year at Sacramento includes the CPI factor. So about 2% CPI. So there's about 4% of it that's associated with new development conversion of land. And so the remaining 4% represents an increase in value on the balance of properties that were on the tax roll for the prior year. So
And CPI?
Consumer price index, yeah.
Price of milk and eggs, right? Isn't that how?
Yeah, I think it's all goods. I think that's the CPI for all goods that's used in the current factor. There's a new CPI indice which they're going to start utilizing. I'm sorry, the new CPI indicator is what they're utilizing now. The old one would have calculated us at about 2.46% for all goods sold, and so the new indices that they're using is now calculating at a 2% rate. So this now reflects a lower CPI value than what had been used in the past.
Is that growth rate consistent, or is that increased, or is that decreased over prior years?
It's fairly consistent. That's what we had in our forecast for this year. So it's consistent with what we thought we would see.
That's great.
And so I think our forecast has us for next year about an 8% growth because it's prior year. And so I think after that is, if our recessionary trends continue, we'll see a big reduction that hits in 2020, and then another big reduction in 2021, and then it should level out in 23 and then start to climb back. So that's what we're looking at this point. So if you look at the last recession, we lost about 23% or so of AV in 2009 and 2010. And then it took about 3 or 4 years to get back to level after that. So we think we could see something along those lines in terms of cycle again this time. Hopefully not as deep, but that's what we're looking at. The state is still having a hard time with sales tax allocations, so it's hard to know exactly what our sales tax trend is right now. They implemented a new software system that has some bugs in it. So they've kind of been guesstimating what the sales tax allocations would be out of the state pool. So we show sales tax projections or revenues coming in flat from year prior to this year, and that's because they're kind of estimating. So they're in arrears on sales tax revenue allocations, and so we don't know when the end in sight of that's going to be. So we know we should have seen some growth, but we don't know exactly what it is. So we're going to project sales tax flat into our budget next year until we know what we see.
It's really helpful, thank you.
Ultra conservative. Anything else on topics? So let's move to committee member reports. And I don't know, when I was little, like scary movies, if I watched a scary movie, I had to watch something regular. That way I can sleep regular. So with that being said, why don't we start with Council Member Laura and go this way about cannabis, because I don't want to have dreams, so start this way.
You want to finish on the regular note, right?
Yes,
On
yes.
the scary side.
Cancer.
I know.
So Riverside County Building Department, we are looking at some of the indicators as well over the past 3 years. Usually at this time, during the holidays, December, November, we begin to see a drop in construction. This drop is lower than it has been in the last 2 years. So in talking to some of the developers, you know, we've got a couple that are telling us that they intend to exceed housing starts next year that compared to last year. And we have some that are kind of slowing down and kind of pulling the plug because home sales are off. Another indicator that we're looking at is flips. They flip a house. They refer to that in the newspaper as a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, and flips are down as well. They're off. So those are some of the things that we look at to kind of project, because we've got to be out ahead of it. Because typically once that market, it doesn't usually tail off, it just drops off. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now. More scary stuff. So you can,
Well, that's not too bad.
we'll do the rainbows over there on the end.
Rainbows.
And then any more unicorns, I'm sorry.
Applications are open now for students. They can start looking at classes. We're going to start the semester early in January. So if you know any students, you have any students, anyone who's interested, send them our way. And on a more personal note, I will not make it in January 9. I'm having surgery, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try to find someone to be here. And then early in the year, I'm going to have a second surgery, so I'm sorry, but I need to do this, so I will try to get someone to sit in for me.
Can we come to you?
The field trip.
You're coming this and I'll
Okay.
be home for 6 weeks. We won't be able to drive.
All right. We'll take you around, don't worry.
Yes. Sure, thank you.
Thanks. You know, to add a little bit further to the discussion about housing and so forth, you know, some of the fundamentals that are in our housing market today are far different than they were in 2006, 7, and 8 in terms of who qualifies for loan. The slowdown is really more of a combination of increasing interest rates. I think the talk of recession has got people, will make people sit on the sidelines a little bit, so it's slowing demand. But we aren't yet, and I say yet, seeing, you know, some of the crazy loan products and things that were sort of the house of cards and set us up for the prior recession. But I think it's, you know, and I think it also depends on where you're at. You know, in the county, some areas are a little more immune to those types of things. Other areas are more susceptible. So it really depends on the sub-market and sub-region of the county. But fortunately, I think it's a temperament of the market. It's not a complete falling off the cliff. Now, what can happen in 2 or 3 years from now? Right. You know, it's anybody's guess. But now it's more of probably just a temperament of the market based on rising interest rates and prices exceeding what people can afford and that sort of thing. But our industrial market still continues to be healthy, and we're not really seeing a significant drop in anything there. So job creation numbers are still pretty solid. You know, you're seeing the discussion, is it the right types of jobs and what those pay, and, you know, that's an ongoing debate that we're always having, and how that plays into the macro economy. But fortunately, I think it's nothing to be terrified about, at least at this point.
Are you seeing anything as far as cost of materials? I'm hearing something about cost of materials, tariffs, increasing costs that were unanticipated. Do you see that in the industrial market at all, or?
You know, it's not my, I've heard some anecdotal information,
Right.
so it's not, I really can't speak to it
Okay.
with any level of expertise, but we have had some, I've heard people say that, but
Yeah.
I don't have anything definitive.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think for us, things are still going good. I didn't know Dr. Brown would be here tonight, but thanks to Terrence and Dr. Brown creating the relationship, we're able to move forward with our boot camp that we put on for the training center as us for the electrical workers, and then trying to bring other trades into that boot camp also, so that we can reach out to as many students as possible throughout the Pass area, since that's the area I live in. And then we're going to take that to other districts as well. And we'll be having our boot camp on March 12th. So if any of you guys want to show up down at our training center, the students from each area will be able to, each district, school district will bring X amount of students, up to 100 students between all of them. So it should be a good event. We hope to make those things more consistent and annual. And then I just wanted to say, as far as like the topics for future agenda and goals and whatnot, in regards to the project that we had as far as reaching out, I always felt as an economic development committee member or a member of any committee that we get more things done by actually doing things than having meetings. I mean, discussions and conversations are great. You know, listening to data and thinking about what's coming up, that's resourceful and it helps us to understand what's going on. But I like to see items and tasks for the committee to try to push things forward. So I don't know if there's something that we could do, but I mean, like if you look back and say 2 years, you know, I think we've learned a lot. But I mean, I don't know if I could say what we accomplished as a committee. And I'm not knocking us. I'm just saying that I think, you know, it's always good to strive to do better. So if there's anything that these committees can say, you know, set a goal to do something like, you know, put X amount of students to work through programs that we discuss like this. I think that's a goal that we can reach for, or any ideas. I mean, I'm willing to work towards those things if I can as a committee member. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you guys for ideas. But hopefully we'll see you guys at the boot camp in March. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Yes.
And just a comment to that, you know, with the city and their strategic plan being kind of a consultant coming out, doing all this information to create, I believe, right, Kyle, these are tasks then that can come to the committee. Because I would agree 100% about, okay, so this is how we're going to tackle this and determining that and then having some action. So it's good. And I think that's the goal, right? So just start by saying from a broader perspective, I've learned a great deal because you guys all come with different experiences and expertise. So I want to thank you for that information. It's really broadened my perspective on just the politics and city and all of these different things. Whenever you think you have, you got to deal with this, no, there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there that we all kind of struggle with. But from the school district perspective, we're spending a lot of time on facilities planning. We have one of the best in the state, if not nation, kind of leading that mission. And so it is a high priority for our board, for our community, for our students, everyone. So we have to get it right and spend the time to kind of plan it out. And in that, we have to be very creative about what we do, given the lack thereof of the funding that's available. But just some accomplishments that we've had last night. Our girls golf team received an award from Riverside County Office of Education for their academic achievement award. The team, I think there's about 7 gals. They have a combined total of like a 4.75 GPA, and they did really well in the CIF championship. So really good stuff. I think I talked about last time about the football team, all of that. But the other thing, we have something that's called a dashboard, the California dashboard. That's the measurement of school districts in terms of how we're doing, and it's kind of newly developed. And just a little bit of information. In our county, Riverside County, there's 22 school districts. And in terms of academically, we are 6th in the county in terms of math and ELA. And that's great, but definitely can be better. And we're working really hard to kind of push those things forward. which creates stress in the system. But it's the right kind of stress to get what we need to have to better outcomes for kids. Our graduation rate is 4th in the county, so we're at 94.2% graduation rate between Bowman High School and Glenview High School. So that's really good stuff. We have a new indicator called College and Career Readiness, which is how we are doing with preparing kids to go to college. We're 4th in the county with that. That is kind of a new indicator. So we really have great people in seats and a great team to keep moving forward, and our suspension rate is going down because of creating more programs and adding counselors to support kids where they are, because one of the things that we're seeing is that it is a different clientele with our students. They need so much more. The environment is different at a younger and younger age. So we're spending a lot of resources in that to try to work through that, and we're seeing a little bit of those results.
Wow. So proud of our town. I just want to say really quickly, it's been such a tremendous year being a part of this committee, so thank you for allowing me to participate. And it's been an eye-opening experience to come in as kind of a new resident to Beaumont, but somebody who works in the region to kind of be a part of this committee. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's really been a pleasure. We are getting ready for MLK Day of Service at United Way, and we are going to be packing hygiene kits for homeless. We're in partnership with Kaiser Permanente, so every Kaiser facility in the county is going to be working with us to provide homeless kits. So we're really excited about that. That's something that's really needed, and we're excited to be having that partnership with Kaiser. Also, we're going to be doing a book drive for MLK Day. So we're soliciting for books for our Take Reading Home program, for our early reading program for our United Way kids. So that is definitely something we're getting excited about. So that's happening January 21st and January 19th through the 21st. So that's kind of our next big thing that's coming up. Wrapping up our fall campaigns, our workplaces have been so generous. We don't get the results from those till the end of the year, end of the fiscal year. So we do all of the work in the fall and then hear about the results in May and June. So this is kind of like the nail biter time, like, all right, push to the end, and hopefully our community's generosity continues. And it certainly has been fantastic for the last few years. So thank you to all of you for that wonderful support. That's all I have.
Ms. Rader?
Well, I have unicorns and rainbows.
Right.
You know, the chamber is recovering and building, and you know, we do have our marketing director now. She's doing a wonderful job, and so in the last week, we started to reinstitute chamber mixers, and in meeting with the chamber and the city and some prominent businesses, in February we'll be reinstituting having chamber mixers, starting with a quarterly basis. So that's a really positive thing, and we're kind of excited about that. That's it.
I have nothing for the group. You've heard enough from me tonight.
Well, lots of good information. So at this point, we are going to adjourn the Economic Development Committee meeting at 5:21. The next regular meeting is scheduled for January 9th at 4 p.m.